So MPs have another chance to change the direction of Brexit tonight. They'll vote in an hour's time on 4 alternative options to Theresa May's deal. All the motions in tonight's second round of indicative votes would soften Brexit and range from stopping it altogether to staying in both the customs union and the single market. The Labour Party says it will support that last option, but Brexit-supporting Conservatives say it would be a betrayal of the referendum result and their own manifesto. A deeply divided cabinet has been instructed not to vote at all. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, joins me now. Gary.
They're going to race through these options tonight. It's not a particularly extended debate. It's kind of a bit of speed dating, really. As you said, boiled down from 8 options to 4. It's possible that Common Market 2.0, that's the customs union plus the single market, so the softest of all the options, that might win. It might win an overall majority. It might come top, even though it doesn't win an overall majority, top of the options, customs union, second referendum, finding it out for second place. But does any of this matter? Does Theresa May have any intention whatsoever of going anywhere near any of these options, even if they were to win? There are strong suggestions that one thing that is going through her mind is maybe trying to organise a runoff with her own deal, putting that up against whatever comes top of the options tonight. But we don't know quite what she's going to do. We do know that she has booked 3 hours tomorrow morning for a political cabinet. That's unusually long. 2 hours after that for a full cabinet. I messaged 3 different cabinet ministers and said, well, surely this means she's got a plan and she's going to unveil it and try and bind you all in. Is that naive? All 3 messaged me back and said, yes, very naive. We are 3 days, of course, after the day we were meant to leave the European Union, and they're debating in there the options. Here's how the day went here in Westminster. The ballot papers are being printed off again. Supporters of this approach hope second time lucky. Some, including many, think the Prime Minister herself, hoping for nothing of the sort. Last time round, last week, MPs didn't give their support to any single proposition. This week, they've winnowed down the options to 4. Membership of the Customs Union, the so-called Common Market 2.0 option, staying in the Customs Union and the single market, a second referendum, and revoking or abandoning the whole Brexit procedure. Common Market 2.0 supporters were cheered by Labour and others whipping to back their approach.
You've got Leavers supporting it, moderate Remainers supporting it, Conservative MPs, Labour MPs, SNP MPs, Liberal MPs. So it's actually a Brexit that could unify Parliament, but in the same time unify the country as well.
But you haven't got a delivery mechanism. You haven't got a government that can pick it up and run with it, actually implement it without falling apart.
Let's cross one bridge at a time.
It's a very big bridge, that, isn't it?
Let me worry about the next steps and what the government is going to do. But
it's central to the whole thing.
I do believe that the government will have to listen to the majority view of the House of Commons. If any option tonight gets a majority, the government will have to listen.
Let's say Common Market 2.0 or the Customs Union actually does get a majority tonight. What happens to Theresa May if she goes anywhere near either of them?
I think probably you end up with quite a number of ministerial resignations. I think you end up with nothing short of uproar within the Conservative Parliamentary Party, because these are absolutely terrible outcomes.
Does the government survive it?
I think it's very possible that in that situation the government wouldn't survive it.
Simon Clarke was one of the pro-Brexit rebels who folded their opposition to Theresa May's deal last week, leaving 28 hardliners still fighting the resistance. Though one who folded said this today.
What I should have done, Mr. Speaker, and did not, was to trust my instincts and those of the British people. I made the wrong call on Friday. If the Prime Minister cannot commit to taking us out of the EU on the 12th of April, she must resign immediately.
We will not be changing our mind on the withdrawal agreement. We've made that quite clear.
With the DUP and more than 24 Tory Brexiteers holding firm, some of Theresa May's critics insist the Prime Minister must adopt whatever option comes top in the Commons votes tonight.
I'm grateful to the honourable lady, and I encourage everybody to look in this direction rather than another direction.
The debate wasn't long underway when 11 environmental protesters tried to superglue themselves to the glass screen in the Commons public gallery. One MP tweeted the view from the benches below. as others struggled on with the debate.
If this proposal were to achieve a majority tonight, and if the government were to accept it as government policy tomorrow, which they should if this House has resolved on something by majority, then I truly believe that it would not be necessary to extend beyond the 22nd of May.
The European Commission President didn't sound like a man perched on the edge of his seat, waiting for progress from Westminster tonight.
Wir erleben ja heute wieder einen Brexit-Tag, die 4. Abstimmung, wenn ich richtig mitgezählt habe. Und niemand weiß, wo es lang geht.
Well, he hadn't counted correctly, but he'd made his point, and with a weariness that now dominates Brussels and quite a few other European capitals too.
Well, joining me here in the central lobby of Parliament is Tobias Ellwood, the Defence Minister. How are you going to vote tonight?
Well, this is the opportunity for us to provide clarity as to where we want to go. The Prime Minister has tried 3 times to get her deal through. There are more options on the table today, and there seems to be a feeling of coalescing around a customs union to be added on to the Theresa May's deal.
So you feel comfortable as a government minister giving your support to an alternative version, a slightly softer Brexit to the one in the deal?
I'm not comfortable at all. This has been very frustrating, and indeed the nation is wanting results from Parliament, and we've not been able to get the Prime Minister's deal through.
But you're prepared to do it?
So something has to give. If we want to honour the referendum, then something has to give, because nobody's going to get that pure form of Brexit.
Because, I mean, you know, we've seen that sort of tape now of the Chief Whip saying some time ago that the election result meant that a slightly softer version of Brexit had to go, became inevitable. This is where we are, isn't it? The customs union, that is the softer version.
I think that's where we are heading towards. It is a shame that we've ended up here, but parliamentary democracy is, the wheels are turning here. We are still making decisions. There isn't the chaos that people are talking about. It could be there in a few days' time, but we need to make decisions, and that's exactly what the public, the British nation, want us to do.
So how do you square that with your manifesto, which is the thing that the Brexiteers keep throwing back at you, and Theresa May as well?
Absolutely, of course. But any manifesto will only succeed if we have a majority. We do not have a majority. The parliamentary mathematics does not allow us to get necessarily this through, or indeed any other legislation.
Do you think Theresa May is prepared to think that as well? Because she has constantly quoted the manifesto and said she wouldn't back a customs union for that reason.
Of course, and absolutely, and that must be the process, that must be the desire of any Prime Minister. But when
Have you said that to her?
Let me finish. When you put your deal through 3 times and colleagues and others have not supported it, but you still want to honour the referendum result itself, you still want to get out of Europe, then something small has to give. And in this case, it probably is going to end up being the customs union.
And have you said that to her?
Well, she's absolutely aware. This is why we have free votes today.
How many of your colleagues do you think are prepared to think the way you're thinking?
That I don't know.
In the government ministers.
We will see that this evening. But I'm sure there are many that absolutely want to move forward. And it could very well be, I don't know yet, it's up to the government and indeed the whips to determine. It could be that the Prime Minister's deal comes back and it's compared to one
so
in
that
the customs union. So we then have a runoff.
Yeah, in that runoff, given you know that the deal has been rejected 3 times, would you then still stick by your backing for the customs union and say that's the one that will get through?
I would prefer to see the Prime Minister's deal go forward, but I have to correct you. Friday's vote actually wasn't just about the Prime Minister's deal. It was actually to do with the withdrawal agreement. If you even want a customs arrangement, or even if you want a second referendum, you still need to go back to what we did on Friday and get that through.
I understand that, but what I'm saying is, if it comes down to a choice between Theresa May's deal and the customs union, you will face that choice. Are you prepared to stick with the customs union, which you're backing tonight?
Well, let's see what
Or will you say, well, no, I still have to back the deal?
I've always wanted the Prime Minister's deal. The Prime Minister's deal isn't on the agenda. It's not a motion here today. We have other offerings that are there. And the closest one that actually does recognise the result of the referendum itself is the customs union. Anything else takes us far away from what I believe the electorate would be satisfied. And I make the point again, Parliament needs to make a decision. And if it rallies around that customs union, then there is something qualitative that we can move forward with.
And to the ERG who say that's not Brexit?
Of course, everybody's going to come from their own angle and say that's not my Brexit. But what is Brexit? You tell me.
I don't know. Brexit means Brexit, according to your side.
No. I'm asking you. You will probably have a personal view as to what Brexit is. We all do. None of us is going to get our own individual Brexit across. And the parliamentary maths means all of us need to compromise if we are to honour what the country wants us to do. I do know what the country is demanding us to do is to conclude this. Let's get back to what Britain does best, and that isn't debating Brexit endlessly.
Tobias Ellwood, thank you very much for joining us. John.
Chris, there is growing unease in Brussels tonight, with Jean-Claude Juncker saying today that the EU is running out of patience with Britain. Our Europe editor, Matt Fry, is here to tell us more. Matt.
John, they've been running out of patience for a very long time now, and I spoke to a couple of people in Brussels and Berlin today who said watching the House of Commons going through these various indicative votes is a wonderful democratic workshop. We just wish you had done this maybe 12 months ago, or even 6 months ago, or even actually a month ago, because the one thing they're all certain about is that the clock is ticking and ticking down fast. Now, there's also a fundamental disconnect here. In this country, I think we sort of have become to blithely assume that the no-deal Brexit scenario is the least likely. That is exactly the opposite to what they think in Brussels, in Berlin, and in Paris. They are preparing for a no-deal Brexit. They cannot see in any kind of obvious way how whatever happens tonight in the House of Commons, they vote for a customs union or a much softer Brexit, how that translates into actual legislation, into that kind of departure, because Theresa May, as far as they're concerned, is still against it. And if they've learned one thing, then the unity and the sanctity of the Tory party, in their estimation, is more important to her than what happens, what kind of Brexit they get. So this is a real problem. And remember one thing, in 11 days' time from now, 11 days, we have to decide how we want to leave. And if not, we have to ask for an extension. And all 27 have to agree to that extension. And there are so many reasons why at least one of them may want to veto that extension, because they don't like the gamble of us taking part in the European elections. They don't like the gamble of a people's referendum. They don't like the gamble of whatever else we might cook up here with. And that is a real problem. They don't want to see a no-deal Brexit, but they're beginning to feel that we might all slither into that position.
Matt Fry. Well, now, you may wonder what these warts are on our faces. They are, in fact, magical microphones, which are worn by rock stars. It's not that we're rock stars, it's just that the crowd here every night, whichever side they happen to be on, come here deliberately to make a lot of noise so that people will hear their point of view. So this remarkably cuts most of it out. Now, here in the United Kingdom, new research shows British manufacturers are engaging in record levels of stockpiling to protect against the possibility of a no deal. Our business editor, Siobhan Kennedy, is here to explain. Siobhan.
Well, John, this is the monthly figure of activity in the manufacturing sector. What we see today is that has reached a 13-month high. Now, amid fears of a slowdown in the economy, obviously any economic manufacturing boom is to be welcome. But peel away the layers, John, and what you see is this is more about companies building their finished products and stockpiling them and stockpiling components. Why are they doing that? Well, they're doing that because they're worried that in a no-deal scenario, there will be blockages at the border because of checks and so on, and that will stop their goods from getting out, and it will stop them being able to bring their components to make those goods in. Now, in the wacky world of Brexit statistics, John, this is the highest level of stockpiling we have seen in any G7 nation ever on record. Of course, John, that conversely means, doesn't it, that what we're seeing here is not driven by underlying economic demand, but much more to do with fears about Brexit.
And there are a lot of nerves about.
There are plenty of nerves today, John. We saw another warning from the low-cost airline EasyJet, which cited a lack of consumer confidence and worries about the economy for a slowdown in ticket sales for the summer. They have so far sold just about a third of their ticket sales for the busy period between July and September, and they are saying that that lack of demand means they are unable to crank up the prices, and that means that's what's responsible now for this hitting of the forecast. One other number to leave you with, John. Goldman Sachs, the respected Wall Street investment bank, today issued research saying that since the Brexit vote in 2016, the UK economy has suffered a £600 million weekly hit hit to the economy every week, John, compared to an economy that hasn't suffered this similar Brexit shock that we're seeing all around us. Compare that figure, John, to that number emblazoned on that Brexit bus 2 years ago.
Siobhan Kennedy. When our Conservative MP Andrew Bridgen is here, he was one of the signatories of a letter to Theresa May calling her to back a no-deal Brexit. Andrew Bridgen, you have been a vigorous opponent, we could say that, of Mrs May's deal. MPs are drifting towards weakening, as you can tell. You have effectively been weakening Brexit.
No, I've been defending Brexit. I led Brexit for the East Midlands and we voted 59% to 41 to leave. My own seat voted by 61 to 39 to leave.
It's what's happened since that you've been doing.
Well, I told the Prime Minister back in July that there was no way I was going to back the Chequers proposals. They wouldn't lead to a Brexit that was what we promised the British people or the best outcome for us.
There's no consensus.
In fact, I wouldn't sign up to her deal if the EU were paying us £39 billion for the privilege.
But there's no consensus for that in the Cabinet, in the Commons.
Well, that's because we have a House of Parliament that's completely out of touch with sentiment in the country. We've got a Remain Parliament.
Are they? The country is utterly split, totally riven, and so is the Commons. That seems to be the most harmonious relationship MPs have had with their constituents in a century.
I think that the language used by the mainstream media based in London is exacerbating all of this. My constituents have decided that they wanted to leave the European Union. The East Midlands voted. The country voted to leave the European Union. What we have is a parliament that won't implement that will. What's at risk here is actually our democracy and the myth of universal suffrage, where it would appear that not everyone's vote is equal.
Actually,
if you're in the Midlands or the North, you're not in the metropolitan, your vote isn't worth as much, John.
But the Parliament is actually doing what you're doing. They're rejecting Mrs May's deal. That's what you want.
And when we triggered Article 50, we knew we were leaving in 2 years at the end of the Article 50 period, either with or without a deal.
But you've been led by a totally split cabinet. She's not been able to get her deal together. Couldn't push it through Parliament.
The Cabinet aren't even voting. They're abstaining tonight. Labour are whipping through votes, which is going to possibly lead to passing a customs union or something else, which is not Brexit at all. The Prime Minister has the choice. You've got over half of the parliamentary party, the vast majority of our volunteers and members in the country and our supporters supporting a managed no-deal Brexit on the 12th of April. Which would end the uncertainty for business and get us out of the European Union.
Do you still have confidence in Mrs May?
I don't have confidence in Mrs May, but she has one chance to save the Conservative Party and to save our democracy and to get us out of the European Union. That's
so you don't have confidence in her, and yet you want her to deliver something. You want somebody you don't have any confidence in to do something that you want. Don't you want to get rid of her before you can get what you want?
The other alternative is a long delay, a new leader, but we're going to be heading to a general election because this House of Commons is out of touch with the people. It's totally fractious. You will not get a proper Brexit through that House of Commons at the moment.
You know that's not true. Basically, the Commons isn't, the paradigm doesn't fit this European debate. Both parties are totally split.
We stood on manifestos that said we'd implement the will of the British people. We're leaving the single market, the customs union, the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice and no second referendum. Labour stood on very similar manifesto. What we've done is betrayed the people. And then we're betraying our democracy. That's intolerable. It can't go on.
Andrew Bridgen, thank you very much indeed for joining us.